There's another picture that I want to show you. It was just put out by the White House. It is the family members on the phone with their loved ones, the released hostages. And President Biden just posted this. Today, I stood behind the families of Paul, Evan, Alsu, and Vladimir in the Oval Office as they spoke to their loved ones for the first time since they regained freedom. These families never lost hope. And today, they'll be reunited with a missing piece of their soul. But to Keir's point, Michael Crowley, and I thought one of the understatements, frankly, that Jake Sullivan made was when he said these kinds of decisions are not simple. And you once wrote this. This is all part of the Kremlin's harsh game of human bartering. Talk about these changes a little more that Keir was just referencing and the complex and frankly, controversial decisions that need to be made in that world.
Yeah, Chris, you know, it appears that this is a tactic that is hostile foreign governments to the United States are increasingly pursuing. They have come to a realization that they can grab Americans within their borders on spurious charges, made-up charges, maybe in some cases a very minor infraction with wildly disproportionate penalties, and use them as bargaining chips to try to get concessions from the United States, try to make an American president look bad, or try to do a straight-up transactional swap. Now, there's always been some of this. You can point back to examples of this going back many decades, but it certainly looks, particularly in the case of Iran and Russia in particular, to have become a more popular strategy. And so it's forcing American presidents into a position of making very difficult choices. And I do think that even if you believe that the recent American strategy of making concessions and releasing prisoners and making these swaps is worth it, even if you think that it's worth it, I think you have to acknowledge that we're sort of creating a new reality here. And there is danger. Now, Jake Sullivan said from the podium, he questioned the idea that there's what you would call moral hazard, which is creating, by doing these trades, you create an incentive for foreign governments to grab more Americans looking for more trades. And Jake said he doesn't see evidence that that cycle is occurring. But boy, intuitively, you would have to think that that is a real risk here. There are people who do think it's happening. And I would just say one more thing, circling back to something else we spoke about before the press conference, and then I'll stop. You asked me about the role of the families. I think that families have become very involved, very engaged, very public. There's been a tradition of telling the families to lay low, keep quiet, don't raise the temperature. And now the families are coming out and they're causing political pressure. They're putting political pressure on the president, on the United States. And I think that that is also contributing to pressure to make a deal, to give up bad guys like Krasikov or Victor Bout, really bad guys who maybe in the past administrations would say, we just can't do this. And I just think you can't deny the reality that political pressure and visible lobbying or media presence from stricken family members is playing a role here. So again, in conclusion, it might be worth it, but I think it does come with real questions and concerns.
There are, Eddie Glaude, in the last minute that we have, and I always ask you the big picture questions. There are these, important geopolitical questions, but there are also what many people would say are just the moral and the human aspects of this. And as you think about all of the conversations that we have heard over the last hour, what say you?
I'm happy that these people will be home with their families. We have to understand the complexity of the geopolitical landscape. I understand that. But tonight, I'm excited. I'm overjoyed that these folks will be home. And I just love the way Jake Sullivan responded to the questions around Donald Trump and the response of J.D. Vance. That just what? 3 words, I don't follow. Right? He refused to politicize it because he, as his tears suggested, was reveling in the joy of these folks returning home.
And finally, a quick post from Barack Obama that finishes this way. It's a tremendous diplomatic achievement, and we're grateful that they'll be back home with their families.